The ever-narrowing sphere of human freedom. Many today value freedom, some even dedicate their lives to protecting it. Freedom is also said to be an integral value of the United States, and if this is true, then it is not actual freedom, but instead a practical conception of it that benefits the functioning of the United States in all aspects, including economic, political, and technological. This conception is not actual. Instead, actual freedom continues to be narrowed by the day, and by each new technological advancement. What, then, is this practical conception of freedom? This conception includes freedoms like freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, etc. We are said to be free because we have these rights, these permissions, but it obscures the truth. This entire conception of governmental constitutional freedom isn't freedom. It is permissiveness by the government and ultimately the whole industrial technological system, the whole of society as of present. What then is actual freedom? To quote the late Theodore Kaczynski, freedom means being in control, either as an individual or as a member of a small group, of the life and death issues of one's existence: food, clothing, shelter, and defense against whatever there may be in one's environment. Freedom means having power, not the power to control other people, but the power to control the circumstances of one's own life. Admittedly, this definition could benefit from clarification or elaboration. However, using it as is, what does it mean? What are the ramifications? It means the average American is not free, certainly not in totality, nor partially. Is the average American able to control the circumstances of one's own life? To some extent, yes. However, certainly not to the fullest extent allotted by nature. Then who is in control of most of the life and death issues of most Americans? To be more clear, who is in full control of these issues? Because it is certainly not the average person. They do have some control, but this control is split and influenced, i.e., it is not free control. Large organizations and faraway authorities have much sway in our lives. For example, the amount of poisons, pesticides, and toxic metals in our food is controlled by the government. Whether or not the world is engulfed in a horrific nuclear war is in the hands of power-hungry and sane alike world leaders. Additionally, the chances of an industrial accident may or may not be low, but it is still not in the control of the average person. Whether or not a devastating oil spill, nuclear accident, or chemical-bearing train derailment happens is dependent on the scrupulousness and prudence of CEOs and specialists alike. Some may respond with, this may be true, a lot of things are out of the average person's control, but people still control their life and death issues. People buy their houses, they can rent, they can buy their food and clothes. They would be partly right in saying this. However, they would also solidify the point presented already. The issues that people do retain some control over are issues in which they don't have full control over, i.e., what they can do is controlled, limited, and restricted. To elaborate, people have to do things in ways that are sanctioned, otherwise they face many consequences. One must buy their food from stores with money obtained legally. Or, if one hunts, then they must get a license and hunt only at certain times and days. To get to the store and buy the food, one likely will need a car. So then traffic laws, licenses, fees, and insurances will have to be heeded lest one wants to face the potential consequences. This is just in matters of food. The average person is strapped down by countless rules and regulations. So while they are in full control of their willingness to go through all of the necessary hoops to get the food, they are not in full control of the hoops. This applies to many other aspects, not just food. What does it all boil down to? Simple obedience. All one needs to survive is to learn all that is allowed, obtain employment, and merely submit to what you are told. Listen to your teachers, listen to your boss, listen to the law. To quote Theodore Kaczynski again, it is important not to confuse freedom with mere permissiveness. This is no emotion-filled childish rant. While personal opinion may scorn the state of such society, that does not preclude a rational understanding of the issue. It is doubtlessly recognizable that a complex technological society needs many rules and regulations. This is at the very least to prevent the most unnecessary harm. However, these regulations are also necessary for the efficiency of the whole system. A complex industrial technological system can only serve the needs of humans insofar as it benefits and does not detriment its own functioning. The needs of the system are almost always made more important than the needs of individuals. This is no evil plan. There are no evil masterminds tapping their fingers together planning the slow increasing technological complexity of society. As each new innovation is reached, it is viewed as a positive. More efficiency here, easier work there. Who wouldn't view this positively? What ends up happening is society ends up changing, not in the interest of those who value actual freedom, but in the interest of those who value technical solutions. To illustrate with an example, think of smartphones. When the first smartphones were developed, they were niched and not so widespread. People who could afford them bought them, or people who couldn't but wanted to, they worked hard to get them, and in return, they could enjoy the novelty and utility. However, after not so long, other people began noticing that utility too. Governments, businesses, and other organizations employed them in their daily operations, thus requiring employees and other organizations working with these organizations to adopt them as well. And so slowly, the smartphone has become nearly as widely adopted as electricity, which also underwent the same process. So what began as a useful and optional device has since become an essential part of society and its daily operation. This happens because of the advantages of adapting to new tech, advantages in efficiency, advantages in competition with other organizations. So once these new techs are adopted, just as operations and organizations adapt to accommodate them, so does culture, or in other words, human behavior. Just as organizations are compelled to adopt new tech, they are compelled to force human behavior to adapt to the tech too. So as society changes in structure and operation, little by little from these implementations, so does culture. Thus, it is clear how people are pushed around in a technological society. People are forced to learn techniques to operate new technologies, lest they become inconvenienced, eventually disadvantaged, or worse, as society's technological development marches on. Organizations as well have to adopt new technologies or force being replaced, losing out in competition, losing members, or being isolated. So society marches on blindly, ignorant to the collective effects that each technological development contributes to, the narrowing of the sphere of human freedom.